even with the nasty weather, the rain and the wind and everything coming in, I knew that it wasn't going to be, it was going to suck, but the suck wasn't going to last that long.
Welcome to episode 110 of the Hunt Backcountry podcast, presented by Exo Mountain Gear. This podcast and the gear that we produce at Exo Mountain Gear share the same purpose: to make you a more capable, confident, and successful backcountry hunter. Straight to the point, no fluff, and no BS, this show is all about providing you with viable information from experienced hunters. To learn more about the podcast or about our backcountry hunting packs, please visit exomountaingear.com. Our guest for this episode is Justin Shaffer. He's an Army Ranger sniper, a hunting guide, a taxidermist, and somehow with all that, he still managed to fill a seemingly countless number of tags in 2017. Species he chased and pursued and successfully hunted in 2017 included grizzly bear, a Dall Ram, a Colorado Bighorn, and numerous others. We speak with Justin about a variety of topics. We dive deep into the team effort that went into filling his Colorado Bighorn tag on a wonderful ram. The story is incredible. Can't wait for you guys to hear it. Although many of you, like me, probably won't be hunting grizzly or Dall sheep or bighorns in the next year, there's still a ton to learn from Justin's experience. So I'm excited to have you guys on board for this one. Before we dive in with Justin, I wanted to give a shout out to the iTunes reviewer, Holdfast11. We've kind of been slacking on giving you guys props for these reviews, but we really do appreciate it. Holdfast11, contact me by email to podcast@exomountaingear.com. We want to get some swag headed your way. And listeners, as a thank you for your reviews, we will continue to pull these winners in future episodes. Beyond the reviews, if you guys are enjoying the show or have any other questions, comments, or feedback, you can always get in contact with us directly by email to podcast@exomountaingear.com. Don't forget as well, we have a free training program for you guys. Just go to exomountaingear.com/train. All right, let's get into this episode with Justin Shaffer. All right, well, Justin, welcome to the Hunt Backcountry podcast. How you doing tonight, bud?
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited for sure. I'm not sure when we're gonna get this one out there, but this is just on the other side of Christmas, so we're all kind of coming off of hopefully a few days of rest and relaxation. And I don't know about Anchorage. What's the weather like up there?
It's actually, we're having a super mild winter, but today it was pretty chilly. Just on the way home, I noticed that the temperature in my truck said 4 degrees, so a little bit chilly right now. But we don't have much for snow on the ground at all here in Anchorage.
Yeah,
it's been a super mild winter overall.
Yeah, it's about 4 degrees where I'm at, and for us, that's like people are flipping out. That's not mild. Far from mild. So, Justin, before we dive into some specific topics here, I'd love to just give listeners some context. If you could give us some personal background, hunting background, obviously your profession kind of plays into this as well. Anything you feel like sharing, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I guess I can start with my main career. I've been in the Army for 24 years now, or March will be 24 years. I enlisted as an 11 Bravo infantryman. Airborne Ranger qualified, and I specialized as a scout sniper for about the first 12 years of my career before I moved up through the ranks, and that's what I've been doing. Since I moved here to Alaska, I'm half owner in a guiding business, Arctic Wild Outfitters, and then I own my own taxidermy shop on the side. So try and stay busy with those three things, or those three things keep me plenty busy.
It's interesting to hear. So full-time military, and then also guiding, yep, and also doing taxidermy. If I look at least this fall, and I know even years past, I would think that all you did was hunt. Surprised to hear you have 3 other jobs going on.
Yeah, no big secret there that, I try and get out in the field every chance I get. And, it helps living here in Alaska with all the over-the-counter opportunities that we have, to be able to just cruise out on weekends or, long weekends or short block of leave and be able to put it out there. So our guide business right now, we primarily just guide for caribou and the occasional grizzly bear hunter, and that only takes up a few weeks out of the year. So, and then taxidermy, I do that a lot in the winter on the weekends. So I just kind of, gather up stuff through the course of the year. And then during the slow time, like now, during the Christmas and holiday season, where I'm getting a little bit more time off of work, I'll knock out a mount on the weekends. And all that just goes back in to help supplement the hunting fund.
Yeah.
Nice.
Do you guys focus on, with your guiding for caribou, a specific area, a specific type of hunt, or do you kind of cover the gamut up there in terms of what Alaska has to offer for caribou?
Yeah, so for Alaska, we're pretty specific up here. You're specific to species, specific to units, and we're licensed to guide in Unit 26, which is at the very top of the state, north slope of the Brooks Range, and we guide fully guided for caribou, and then we also do drop and float camp hunts. And depending on schedule and bookings, we run anywhere from 2 to 5 weeks worth of hunts, generally the last half of August into the first half of September.
So caribou, and then you mentioned grizz is the other species, right?
Yeah, so residents, it's an over-the-counter tag, but we primarily guide mostly for non-residents, and that's a draw hunt, and they only give out 6 tags, and draw success runs in single digits now. So we'll see one once a year or every other year. We'll have a grizzly client in camp.
Wow, that's wild, man. Yeah, you've done some grizz hunting yourself, right? I think I saw you take one solo with a bow.
I did, yeah. So I killed a couple of grizzlies with my bow and a big brown bear. This year, I shot a really nice mountain grizz. He stretched 8 foot nose to tail, just shy of a 25-inch skull. And I'm pretty anxious to get the tooth aging back from Fish and Game. The teeth that they normally pull for them, he didn't even have. That's how old he was and how worn out. So just an absolute tank beast of a bear that I was able to shoot with my bow this past spring.
That's crazy. Did you have your eye on him specifically?
So we've been hunting this area 5 or 6 years now. We got a lot of big bears in there, and we run a lot of trail cameras, and we had 3 to 4 really big boars that we'd been targeting. So we knew that he was there, but we only had a handful of game camera pictures. That time of year, the boars are really, really active as far as breeding, so they're covering ground, and you'll see them through your areas, once a week if you're lucky, once every couple of weeks for them to make their rounds through the territory. So just got lucky being in the right place at the right time when he came through.
How did that hunt go down? What was the strategy? I mean, were you kind of at an ambush point? Were you out, searching or glassing? I mean, tell us how that went down.
Yeah, so that hunt, particular when I actually did take him, I was hunting in Unit 13 where we can legally bait for grizzly. So that was set up on a baited site. And like I said, just happened to be there at the right place at the right time. That area, we do a lot of spot and stalk. There's a lot of big grassy hillsides. And it just depends on what the bears are doing and the time of the year on how we hunt them. Yeah.
Is the baiting strategy for grizzlies any different than what guys might be familiar with down here in the lower 48?
No, not at all. Like I was saying, though, the earlier in the season, you don't see the boars very often on your bait sites. You got a lot of sow and cubs, and the bears will just cruise through looking for sows that are coming into heat. They don't eat. They don't hang out. So we don't see a lot of good big bear activity until later in the season, almost towards the end of June, when they're just about done breeding and they're trying to put some weight back on and, they're hungry. But we run our bait sites just like you would for any black bear hunt. Primarily, we use popcorn and then old fryer grease, and that's our 2 things that we go to. And grizzlies will eat anything.
Is popcorn just cheap and lightweight, easily packable?
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly it. So we buy 50-pound bag kernels at Costco, and then we just cook it in turkey fryers in old fryer grease. And you hit the nail on the head. It's the cheapest, lightest thing for us to use. Like I was talking about those sows and cubs that come in May. You got a couple of 55-gallon drums out there, and you get a sow with 3 3-year-old cubs in there, and she'll each out of house and home. It'll get expensive using dog food or other things like that.
So how long have you been in Alaska?
So March 28th will be 15 years since I moved here.
Were you as into hunting previously before arriving in Alaska, or did this kind of develop over the last 15 years for you?
Oh, no, no, no. So, no, I've hunted all my life, and it's been, the biggest part of my life and the whole reason that I came to Alaska. So, I had worked at the sniper school down in Fort Benning, Georgia, and it was time for me to rotate. And I called up my branch manager, and said, what's available. And he was like, you got Hawaii or Alaska, and it was a no-brainer. So just being the outdoorsman and the hunter that I am, Alaska had always been on the radar. And when that opportunity came to move up here, I jumped at it.
You mentioned the sniper school, and I know that you've even competed in some sniper competitions and have a plethora of field experience really there. I would just love to kind of pick out some of the lessons specifically on the shooting side, and not so much the technicalities of physically shooting, but how does that mindset play into your hunting? What are some of the lessons that we can learn from somebody with your experience on that side of the things?
So a lot of what I do in the military and the specialized training of being a scout sniper, translates right into the field of being any type of hunter. Your field craft, just your bushcraft, being able to be in the woods, and it's no different than hunting a man versus hunting an animal. It's different strategies, different techniques, and a lot of that stuff just crosses over, and it's a natural path from the military into the hunting world.
In the midst of a shot opportunity, do you have a certain sequence that you run through? What's kind of going through your mind the moments leading up to a shot opportunity?
So for me, a lot of it just goes into the prep work, and I try and do as much prep work as I can, either in my physical ability or my shooting, and a lot of that just comes down to what in the military we call dress rehearsals, full dress rehearsals. So when I'm at the range shooting my bow or shooting my rifle, I'm wearing the same thing that I'm going to be hunting in, same hat, same, I'm wearing my bino case, those things that I would have that if I was in the field taking that shot, so that when I go through my shot routine, everything feels the same, or, it's as close to as what you can mimic when you're practicing. So just a lot of it's routine and just repetitiveness. We have a saying in the military, and especially in the sniper community, that consistency equals accuracy. So, and I try and do that same thing when I'm hunting and when I'm practicing, try and do the same thing over and over and over again, just becomes muscle memory, and just the repetition.
So good. Something that I'm sure we've all heard before, but more of us probably need to do it in terms of practicing in real situations with, as you mentioned, even down to exactly what you're wearing in terms of accessories, bino harnesses, etc.
So is your goal prior to a shot almost to be like on autopilot where you're not even thinking about anything?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So as much success as I've had hunting and all the opportunities I've had hunting, I'm still that 14-year-old kid that just gets geeked up at every opportunity. And I just, if I wasn't able to go into autopilot and just, go through that routine, I am the poster child for buck fever. So it's funny. My good friends that hunt with me, they give me crap all the time. I just, the breathing and the shakes, and that's me every single time, whether it's big, small. I've shot a dozen of them. It doesn't matter. I am the poster child for buck fever. So I've got to have that routine where I just fall back into muscle memory and go into autopilot mode. Otherwise, I wouldn't kill anything ever.
How do you quiet the buck fever, whether that's mentally or physically, whether it's your mind racing or your heart pumping? How do you kind of flip that switch to go into autopilot and to concentrate when all those nerves and thoughts are running?
I think so much of it, again, just falls back into the muscle memory and the routine, that it's just kind of natural and everything just kind of falls into place, and as soon as the shot's executed, I fall apart. The adrenaline blows through you, and I become a mess. But I think so much of that is just the routine and the practice and just that basic muscle memory, and so much of it comes down to that last few seconds of the execution. And, that's what makes me probably a little bit more successful than, some people that don't have the ability to put that much time into their practice sessions.
That's awesome. So we want to dive into some sheep topics with this episode and with you, and you have quite a bit of experience there. I'm sure enough, more than enough to fill just this episode, but I'd love to begin to have the conversation with you on sheep hunting, not just as, as yourself being an Alaska resident, obviously have more opportunity than most, but not only talk about what's available in Alaska, but even I know that this year you hunted Colorado on a sheep tag as well. Before getting into any specifics, go ahead and kind of give us some of your experience sheep hunting, and then talk a little bit about the specific hunts that you had this year.
Yeah, for sure. So sheep hunting is absolutely my favorite species to do. So obviously, like you said, being here in Alaska, I've got a lot more opportunity with over-the-counter sheep hunts every single year than most guys. So I try and make it a point to try and get out every single year to chase sheep. And just for me, I love, strapping a pack on and just kind of that old school primal where, you're living out of your pack, you're hiking in, just the ruggedness of sheep hunting. So I try and do that every year, put in for all the premium draw tags. And then, if you don't get a draw tag, we have so many over-the-counter opportunities as a resident here in Alaska that, it's easy to plan a sheep hunt every single year. So this year I was lucky. I drew a really good sheep tag that's only about 20 minutes north of my house. And better yet, it's only about 5 minutes from my buddy's plane hangar. So we were able to do a lot of preseason scouting, and it just so happened to be the unit that I took my first sheep in when I moved up here. So I had some familiarity with the country already before we got in there. And just having that prior knowledge and then being able to scout it so often, so close to home, we were able to find, the rams that we were in there that we decided to target, and then just our routes in, water points, things like that pre-execution going into the hunt just made it successful.
Yeah. I would imagine sheep numbers, being what they are, obviously is much different than a lot of species that many of us are used to hunting, that scouting, all that pre-planning is just absolutely critical for sheep, right?
Oh, for sure. The country is so big and so rugged, you can only cover so much on foot. And even with the best lasts on the market, there's only so much you can cover. So having that ability to get in a plane, and fly 2, 3, 4 hours a day, you can cover so much more.
Yeah. So kind of walk us through sheep seasons, their behaviors, how you're scouting them at what type of year versus when you're hunting them, and has that changed? Because obviously, if us lower 48 guys think of elk or mule deer, kind of know that they have a summer pattern and things begin to change, and we can kind of anticipate where they might be moving. Is sheep the same way? Are they going to be where they are when you're scouting them? And also when you're hunting them? Kind of take us through that process of the months leading up to the hunt.
Yeah, so our general season for sheep here starts August 10th and runs to September 20th. And a large majority of the sheep that are killed within that first 5 days of the season. So we're hunting them during the summer months. One of the great things about Alaska is all the daylight that we have. That early in August during sheep season, you got 18, 19 hours of daylight, which obviously helps for, hiking in and out, locating, and then, being able to hunt them. But the sheep are pretty stable as far as, if you find them in a pocket one day, if they're not disturbed by either wolves or, other predators or man, generally they're going to be in that same area, and they've got a pretty good routine as far as where they bed, where they feed, and where they water. So if you can get in there early, observe them, generally, if they're not bumped or not spooked, they're going to be in those same areas come opening day on August 10th. Which I remember exactly how it panned out for us. The 2 weeks leading up to the season, we tried to scout every single chance we had. And 2 weeks prior to the opener, all the way to the day of the opener, the sheep were in the exact same spot we had seen them every single time.
When I was up there, south side of the Brooks Range for a caribou hunt this year, I remember the pilot saying wolves had been a pretty serious problem with the sheep populations.
They can be, for sure, and it's different in each unit. Okay. I believe we've got 8 different mountain ranges with sheep, and the wolves and the predators are different for each of those mountain ranges.
Oh, okay.
So, and the North Brooks has a huge wolf population, so they do hammer the sheep pretty good up there. And a lot of it has to do with the winter as well. Snow depths ice and cold, how far it pushes the sheep down the mountain, whether or not those wolves have better access to sheep that are lower on the mountain. So not only do the predators take a toll on them, the winter does as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, are predators an issue at that time of year in the summer months? Because sheep seem like they would be so much higher than what the wolves are. Are the wolves really climbing up that mountain?
So they do. So just just to give you an idea where we were camped at a little over 5,000 feet, and most of the area that we were hunting at, it tops out at about 5,500. Some of the back bowls and the glaciers will top out at $6,000. And we were following wolf tracks on the sheep hill or on the sheep trails on the top of the hill. And where we set our camp up in the saddle in between two 5,500 foot peaks at $5,000, we had a wolf come into camp. So they're up there with them. They're hunting them year round. It's just, that time of year, it's a lot harder for them to get on them. But yeah, they're up there and they're putting the pressure on them year round.
So with the hunt like you described and the weeks leading up to it, where you have some sheep located. What is your approach like? How are you wanting to set up camp in relation to this spot? Are you wanting to be higher, lower? Kind of walk us through the logistics of really starting that hunt.
Yeah, so for this hunt, we were kind of limited. The sheep, there was one ram in particular that we were targeting, the biggest ram in the group, and they were right on the border of where my sheep unit started. And from that side of the border, there was absolutely zero access. So we had to go around them quite a long ways. It was, a 15 to 20 mile 4-wheeler ride. And then it took us an 11-hour pack in to get to them. We were pretty limited where they were, like I said, because of the terrain being on the border of where we could actually set up and camp on them. But we ended up camping near our last water source that we could find. And we were right at about 2 miles line of sight from where we could see the sheep and where we felt comfortable that we wouldn't push them out of the bowl and out of the unit. So we had to use the terrain as far as what the borders were for the unit on where we could set up to camp.
So 2 miles out, obviously glassing can be a big part of any sheep hunt, whether you're just trying to locate or trying to, judge the curl, what have you. What's your go-to glassing setups?
So I carry a set of 10x42 Swarovski EL binos, and then I've got a Swarovski HD 20 to 60 by 80 spotting scope. And that's what I use for probably 95% of my hunting setup, and that's what I use on all my mountain hunts, whether it's sheep, goat, caribou, bear. So that's my go-to glass.
So when this a hunt like this is starting, 2 miles out, there's camp. How are you judging when to make an approach? Are you sitting back and doing some final observations for the first day or so? Are you just basing it on the conditions of when to really kind of see how you can push and be aggressive? How does that work with sheep hunting?
So for sheep hunting, you got two trains of thought: is either, let it happen or you force how it happens. And our plan, we went in 3 days early, and, it was one to get in there, get set up, and watch them and have the best avenue of approach and plan of attack to get on them come opening day. And my plan was initially to bow hunt them. And then I had a partner of mine, an old ranger buddy that I went to sniper school with, who had just retired. He flew up, and the plan was for him to black bear hunt, and then he was going to carry a rifle as backup for me. So we get in there those 3 days, and we set up glass, and the sheep were in the exact same spot we had flown over them, the couple weeks prior. And we just set up over the next 3 days and just watched them. And, they basically stayed in the same bowl, bedded on the same edge, fed in the same bottom, drank in the same bottom. They did the exact same thing for 3 days. So we set up our game plan with the only approach we had, which was across the ridge line. And the plan was to bow hunt them. And so we did this all the way up until the evening of the night before the opener. And I went back up on top of the ridge. Matt stayed down in camp, and I was like, I'm going to go up and put the sheep to bed. And the plan was to get up before light, and make our approach on them and try and get them as they came out of their bed that morning to move back into the open bowl to feed. And I was up there watching the sheep feed over the edge and bed up for the evening. I looked down in the bottom where we had come from originally, and there was two hunters that were moving into the bowl. So, we hadn't seen a soul for 3 days, hadn't seen anybody in the prior 2 weeks of scouting, and somebody else who had drawn the tag was now moving in on the same sheep that we were in. So I bailed off the mountain, ran back down to camp, grabbed Matt, and, kind of came up with a quick game plan, quick change of plans, and just grabbed the minimum stuff that I could, grabbed the rifle that he had been carrying, and I bailed off the mountain to move into position that night to get ahead, and just moved across the mountain, found a sheep bed, and bedded up for the night through the rainstorm to wake up to get ahead of those guys before they got to jump on the sheep in the morning.
Wow. So how far out were they about, do you think?
So those guys had moved in to what we called danger close, to where we would have thought about camping to set up on the sheep just because of the potential of the sheep coming through, winding them, seeing them. And, so we felt that we were as close as you could get. So those guys were inside their bedroom. And when that night, when I hiked across, I was about 100 yards below their camp, and they never even saw me come through. And I walked past them, set up in a sheep bed, and spent the night, woke up. And when I shot the sheep, I could see their tent. And if they'd have been up and awake when daylight came, they could have shot the sheep from their camp.
Wow.
So all that planning, all that time, the entire game plan that we had, all went out the window when those two other hunters showed up in the same bull to chase the same ram we were.
Was that, were they guided, do you think, or were they just residents out? I mean, could you tell just from what they had and how they're moving?
Yeah, so they were resident guys. They had drawn the sheep tag. We were hunting just outside the city of Palmer, which is just north of Anchorage, and they were a couple of guys that lived in Palmer,
okay.
Had access to a plane, and they had flown a couple of times and had seen the same sheep that we had seen, and just basically did the same approach and everything that we did, except they showed up the day before the opener where we had been there a couple of days prior, trying to pattern the sheep a little bit more.
And so you think that they moved in that close and set up camp knowing where those sheep were exactly, and they were just that aggressive?
So what's funny is we ended up talking to them afterwards. So that night when I bailed off the mountain, I left Matt in camp, and the plan was for him to meet me in the morning, for the hunt. So that morning I got up. Matt wasn't able to make it because there was a nasty storm, and the ridgeline that we had to walk on was pretty nasty. And we had made the call, said, hey, if it's raining and nasty when you get up, just wait till daylight. Well, I had already killed the ram at 5:05, 5:10 in the morning, and Matt walked by their camp at 7:30 in the morning. They were still in bed.
Wow.
And so he wakes them up, because what was funny is when I had shot my ram, the sheep had ran all the way around the mountain, and they were huddled up in the cliffs just below these guys' tent. So, Matt's trying to get them out of bed, saying, hey, there's sheep right there. So anyway, long story short, that night before when they were up glassing where we thought they had seen the sheep, they didn't see them, just because of the lay of the terrain.
Yeah.
The sheep had already fed around the corner and bedded for the night. And they didn't know the sheep were there. So
yeah, that makes more sense. I was thinking, man, that's awfully aggressive to try and sneak in that close and be like, yeah, we'll just, wake up and shoot it from camp in the morning.
Yeah, so when we had talked to them before, they hadn't flown it in a couple of weeks, and there was two adjacent bowls, and where they had seen the sheep, they were on the edge of the one bowl, and when they went in there, those sheep weren't in that bowl anymore, so they just went up to the next ridgeline and camped. So, yeah, in the end, where we thought that they were being, reckless and where they were camping, they didn't have an idea of where they had an idea of where the sheep were, but they didn't know where they were. They didn't have them pinpointed. So,
yeah,
gotcha.
Wild. So when you went out to go kind of bivvy for the night and just stayed in that sheep bed, I mean, how minimal were you? What were you taking with you on that?
Yep. So I left the bow, obviously, with the competition of those guys. I grabbed the rifle, and then I always carry. So what I have for my safety pack that I carry with me everywhere is I have a set of Kuyi Super Down top and bottom, beanie cap and gloves, and I keep that in a waterproof bag with a waterproof bivy sack, and that's with me no matter where I hunt, anywhere in the world. It's kind of my emergency go-to bag. So that was already in my pack. I grabbed my Yukons, my Kuyi Yukon rain gear, a couple of snacks, my water bladder, my water pump, and that was it. And bailed off the mountain.
Wow. So no shelter cover?
Yeah. So what I ended up doing is my bivy sack, my emergency blanket bivy sack. When I got to where I was, the last spot that I thought that I could be, set up before dark and before the weather hit, I scraped out a sheep bed, made it a little bit bigger, a little bit flatter, and then I took that bivy sack and I cut it out into a bigger square. Cut it out from a sleeping bag to a square, and then I just rocked that out and then laid that across the edge of the sheep bed that I had cut out of the side of the mountain, and that's what I just curled up under. I put my super down on, put my rain gear on, my gloves, my beanie cap, and then I just huddled under the makeshift shelter that I had made. So, there, again, I knew that there wasn't going to be a lot of darkness. That time of year we got a lot of daylight, so I knew that I wasn't going to be out there long. And, even with the nasty weather, the rain and the wind and everything coming in, I knew that it wasn't going to be, it was going to suck, but the suck wasn't going to last that long.
Yeah.
That's always such a great perspective to have, right? Yeah. We've talked about that plenty of times. And the funny thing with that is, while I'm curled up, in a ball, freezing my butt off with the rain and the wind hitting me, you can see the lights from the city of Palmer, that are only a couple of miles away. Just add an insult to injury.
All warm and comfortable and dry down there.
Yep.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so no, I definitely earned it, so...
It's just so wild to think of, Alaska, and you think of these crazy remote hunts, yet there's still opportunity just literally within distance of these towns, too. Just because, you step away from the town and it is wild and remote in a lot of ways, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's the thing. Any city in Alaska, you just go over the next ridge or the next hilltop, and you are in the wild. It is, it's as wild as if there wasn't anything there to begin with, just one ridge line over and the city's gone and you're in the vast, wide open mountains or tundra of Alaska.
Just amazing. Amazing that those places are still there.
One question I had for you is are sheep going to be as spooky as, as anything else, or are they more like a mountain goat that may just kind of run around the other side of the ridge?
So my experience with sheep, and mountain goat is my second favorite animal to hunt. Mountain goats live in nastier country, but they are far less skittish than sheep. So sheep are a lot more skittish than a mountain goat is, but they don't live in quite as nasty terrain. They still live in nasty stuff, but they have an old adage or saying here, mountain goat country begins where sheep country ends.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, no, sheep are far more skittish than mountain goats are.
What's the most difficult part about sheep hunting? You've done this not just once, but many times. And you mentioned this kind of your favorite pursuit. What's the most difficult part about it consistently?
Well, yeah, if you get past the full curl legal requirement, finding a full curl ram, it's just the adventure and the terrain that you're into. You've got to fly in, hike in, 4-wheel in, long distances. You're living out of your pack, whatever you've got in your back, just super primal. Everything that you have that you carry in is what you're going to have to survive, whether you're out there, 3, 5, 7, 10 days. So to me, it's just a challenge. The country, the terrain, just the vast wildness. That's to me, the epitome of hunting is sheep hunting.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that that's as much what draws you to it as it is the animal itself?
Oh, absolutely. So I don't think there's anything more beautiful or more majestic than a sheep, but, it's not just, the white sheep and the big full curl horns, but, it's the country that they live in, the glaciers, the tundra, the peaks, the mountains, just everything about it is just ridiculously amazing.
So what about sheep hunting do you think those of us from the lower 48 who maybe aren't super educated on sheep hunting, what don't we know? Or what should we know that's maybe not common knowledge or something that we've talked about?
I think, so much that you just, from what you see on TV, a lot of it just looks easy. You see that last few minutes of what it takes to get into sheep country, and to do the sheep hunt, but it's all the logistics going into sheep country, and Alaska is a dangerous place to hunt, weather, terrain, predators, this it's not an easy life here. And, those sheep live in nasty, rugged country. And, a lot of people that have never been there, you see what you see on TV, and, in a 30-minute show where they got 22 minutes of film, you're not seeing all that prep work and everything that it took to get in there, and what it takes to prep to be a successful sheep hunter.
So you mentioned grabbing the rifle, at least for this hunt specifically, and I know you love to bow hunt so much as well, but on the rifle side of things and with your background, I'm curious, what's your kind of go-to setup for hunting up there in terms of rifle optics?
So it's a little funny. Honestly, I don't even own a hunting rifle. I've got a handful of rifles. One of them is a 458 Watt, and that's my backup bear rifle. I've got a couple of 6.5 Creedmoors that are actually my daughter's rifle. And on that hunt, I ended up borrowing my business partner that I guide with, his 300 short mag. Mm-hmm. So what I took on that hunt was 300 short mag. It was a Christensen Arms rifle, and it had a Night Force 5.5 to 22 scope.
So do you not own a hunting rifle because you just prefer the bow so much?
So I bow hunt about 90% of the time, and when I don't bow hunt, I usually have a buddy that's with me that's rifle hunting, or I just borrow one of my buddies hunting rifles.
So you think that it's just because you've shot so much previously as a sniper that appeal just isn't there as much for you?
No, and honestly, it's got nothing to do with the appeal. I mean, I'm just as stoked to torch something with a rifle as I am with a bow. Obviously, it's harder with a bow, and there's a little bit more reward in bow hunting. But for my entire hunting career, if you want to call it, growing up as a kid, I started out bow hunting, and I've continued to bow hunt through my entire life. So to me, it's my preferred method. It's got nothing to do with what I did in the military or, liking one over the other, because I did one, as a job. It's got nothing to do with that at all.
So let's transition. So many of the guys listening to this, again, are in the lower 48. Sheep hunting seems out of reach for a lot of guys. I want to transition and talk about your Colorado hunt that you did. But before we really get into that hunt specifically, what are some good starting points? Is there a realistic hunt in terms of budget and in terms of odds? I mean, what are some of the ways that are most approachable, I guess, for your average guy in the lower 48 with sheep hunting? It's never going to be super easy or super cheap, but kind of where should we kind of look to start?
Yeah, so for sure, you got to play the tag game, as you guys know. There's a lot of sheep hunting opportunities throughout the West. Draw odds on all of them are horrific for anybody. But if you're not in the game, you can't win. So if you're talking about the 4 North American sheep species, you've got to be in the points game to get in there to try and do that. Obviously, stone sheep, that doesn't apply, with Canada. But if you're hunting deserts, Dalls and any of the in Alaska where there's no points but draws, or any of the bighorns, you've got to be putting in points to even be in the pool. And if you're not talking about those, if you want to just talk about affordable sheep hunts, probably one of the most underappreciated species that is getting a little bit more attention now are aoudad. That can be found in New Mexico and Texas, and there's lots of opportunities to hunt those, and they're nowhere near the price range any of the 4 North American sheep are.
What is we've had discussions on this whole points game and things like that. Where do you just personally stand? I mean, I don't want to start a war and make people mad, as these discussions tend to do, but what are some of your thoughts on points and on people, really just, even with points, looking at decades and not even having legitimate shots, obviously with some states and some species?
Yeah, I mean, for us that are, wanting to do it and it, it sucks. It sucks building, points for 10, 15, 20 years, when every year you watch go by and, you're like, when am I going to get my shots? That part of it sucks, but at the same time, there's only, so much commodity to go around, so it's a way to manage it, each state's different and some are better than others, but, you've got to have that point system in place for the draws.
So let's begin to talk about your Colorado hunt from this year. How long had you been playing that game? How many points did you have? How did the tag acquisition come about for you?
Yep. So I'm actually originally from Colorado, but I'd only been putting in for the last 9 years for sheep in Colorado. So I drew that tag with 9 points. And what's kind of funny is S44 is the tag that I drew. And in the previous 9 years, I had never put in for that tag. So, and the reason that tag came about is this year as I drew that Dall sheep tag, and S44 was the only non-resident archery hunt that didn't overlap my Dall sheep hunt. So I called up my buddy Robert Hanneman at Hunting Fool, and just talked about different areas and different units. And he was like, man, that place has got good genetics. It's, a tough hunt historically just because of, the terrain that the sheep are in. But he was like, what do you got to lose? Put in for that hunt. Put in for it for the first time ever, not knowing, but the little bit that I talked to Rob with, and, boom, I draw the tag.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when you say S44, was that in the game management unit of 44 in Colorado?
It was, yeah. So S being specific to the sheep, and Basalt is the unit, but yeah, Unit 44 in Colorado.
Yeah, okay, cool. So you'd mentioned you were a Colorado resident previously. Were you familiar with that area at all, or was this all new to you?
No, it was completely new to me. I had grown up elk and deer hunting just north of there, but I had never been through that area. I knew nothing about it prior to putting in for the hunt. Obviously, once I drew it, I went into what I do or what I like to do, and that's, the prep work. So, one of the first people I called again was Rob, to let him know I drew the tag. And immediately Rob fires off an email with a bunch of contacts from past Hunting Fool members that had drawn that tag, and from there I just got on the phone, got on the computer, started sending out emails, phone calls, talking to the bios, the game wardens, basically anybody that would answer a phone or an email that had any knowledge with the unit, I was contacting, and I just kept a running list and a log of everything that I, found out about the unit. And I just, we put together a game plan.
So, and did you have any guided on the ground assistance for this? It was all just pre-planning assistance with the research.
So the only, I guess you could call pre-planned on the ground is a buddy of mine, Matt DeFrank, that lives in Colorado. Drove out there. That unit, they do a sheep count each year, and it was a week or two prior to the season starting. So Matt drove out there from Denver, volunteered and did the sheep count with them. So he was the only person that had been on the ground from the team prior to us getting there. And then through Facebook, social media, the wonder that it is, I met a guy named Dave Waller that lives in the unit, was very familiar with the unit, had hunted sheep and ran a cattle ranch just inside the unit border. And, he sent me a message and offered up, said, hey, if you need a place to stay, any assistance, don't hesitate to call me. So between Matt and him on the ground, that was the people that I had on the ground, but I didn't have anything guided going into there, per se, as far as hiring a guide to go in.
That's so cool, man. There's so much that I get sick of with obviously social media and all this, but it's so cool. When hunters can just come together and not even know each other and start to help each other. That's super neat.
Yeah, for sure. It was amazing, the outpouring, of support that I got when people had found out that I had the tag. Besides the people that I contacted, I couldn't tell you how many people contacted me that said, hey, I've got a buddy of a buddy that elk hunts there, or if you need another pack, or if you need this, if you need that, sheep tags are special. And this was for sure one of them.
Did you mention how many tags were available for this unit?
So I believe there were 5 tags total. No, I'm sorry. There were 6 tags total, 4 archery and 2 rifle, 1 non-resident tag.
Wow. Okay. So you're the only non-resident tag.
Yep, I was.
Wow.
So, and historically, this is the toughest unit in the state as far as harvest statistics go.
Yeah. And at what kind of number do you recall?
So the only archery ram I believe that had been killed in there in the past 10 years was from a governor's tag holder 2 years ago, who having a governor's tag, he was able to hunt any unit in the state during any time frame. He was able to hunt during the rut when all those sheep come down low and consolidate on the ewes. So although he was a great guy to talk to and helped with some knowledge of the unit, he didn't have a lot of he didn't hunt the same area of the unit that we had concentrated in.
That's amazing, man. So this terrain, what was it like? What kind of elevation were you at? Where were the sheep hanging out? I'd just love to hear more about it.
Yeah, so where we hunted was a little over 10,000 feet, and we were in the back bowl of the unit, and it's probably, 85 to 90% timbered, and that's what made it tough. Wow. is these timber rams, they'd only come out a little bit during the day, early morning and late evening to feed, and then back into the timber. So that's what made it hard and why it's historically such a tough hunt. It's not your typical sheep train where, they're on open faces or in rocky cliffs. Mm-hmm. They're hanging out on the sides of the hills and the timber.
Wow. So what became your strategy to find them? That's tough.
Yep. So everybody that I had talked to said that the key to this was being able to have glassing teams that could help walk you into the sheep. So where the actual sheep area is, there's very little that you can glass yourself to find the sheep. So I had helped put together, or with all the guys that had offered help, we put together and set up 3 different glassing teams. And we went in there a week early. And for that entire week that we set up, we couldn't find anything but ewes and lambs. So everything I had heard about how tough the unit was, was coming to fruition when we got there and we're on the ground. And once I actually got in there, I was a little overzealous, with all the experience that I have and the ability that I feel that I have, that I thought that it was going to be, a fairly easy hunt. And, I got in there and from the moment that we touched down on the ground, I was like, man, this is going to be tough. And that entire week of scouting that we had, it proved tough. But in the end, the funny thing is having those glassing teams out there, I was the one who on the ground in the sheep pocket that found them first.
Mm-hmm. From what kind of distance then were you when you saw them?
So the first time I found the rams, it was a little over 400 yards. Mm-hmm. And this is where the glassing guys helped. So when I found them, nobody else could see them just because of the terrain of where they were. So you could not draw up a better archery stock lane than what I had. The wind was in my face. They were bedded on the side of an open hill. There was a great big pile of brush that covered the approach. And then there was a big burnt dead tree for a reference of where they were. So the stock's unfolding. And just, again, like you said, you couldn't have drawn it up any better. So I'd make this giant loop to get in on them. Once I drop off to go into the bowl, I come right into a sheep trail, so it's just silent, it's quiet. I make my approach all the way into the dead tree, where I had lays from them. I knew that I was going to be in at about 50 yards. So I get an arrow knocked. I go into friggin', the stock mode, kill mode, and start making my way in. And just as I creep up to where I'm going to be able to get a shot, the wind switches. I feel it on the back of my neck, and next thing you hear rocks, tumbling down the hill, and the sheep blow out. But when they blew out, they came into view of a couple of the glassing teams, so they were able to flag me back onto them and talk me into the general area of where the sheep had gone, and then I picked them back up again.
Yeah. So were you guys communicating with radios? How was this working with the glassing teams?
Oh, we did, yeah. So we started out with radios, and then we had orange panels as well to help us find each other and direct each other.
Okay.
Orange panels and orange ball caps, blaze orange.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So that initial approach, this was on day what of you even being there? I know you mentioned you got there a week early and were kind of glassing for a week. How far into the hunt was this?
So this was opening day.
This was opening day. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, this was opening day. So.
All right. So they bust out of there. How many rams were you approaching, do you think? Are you for sure what that group size was?
Yeah, no, for sure. So there were 4 rams in the group, 2 which I guessed to be 180 type rams, just absolute toads. The ram that I ended up killing was the 3rd biggest in the group, which he's a 7/8 curl, and then the smallest ram was a 3/4 curl. And honestly, I would have shot the 3/4 curl if he'd have been the one that presented me the shot. So that was my goal going into it, was a 3/4 curl or better ram. So when the stock unfolded, when I got to them, just because of how steep and rugged the terrain was, the only one of the 4 rams that I could see was the one that I ended up shooting, and he was the 3rd biggest in the group. Okay. And absolutely zero regrets shooting him.
Right.
Although, as it typically plays out, as soon as I put an arrow in him, the two biggest rams stepped into
Show
sight.
Yeah.
They stood there for over 3 minutes at 30 yards, looking back at him, waiting for him to get up. Just absolute tanks, but, no regrets whatsoever.
Let's back up to when they busted out. So you said the glassing team saw him. You're in communication with them of kind of knowing what direction to move. What was the next plays? Were the conditions? Did they allow you to make a stalk? How did the hunt continue to play out?
Yeah, so where the rams had busted out, they actually came all the way around the side of the mountain where we had sat the whole morning glassing. So I had already had an idea of what the terrain looked like, and once they let me know where they were, I began the stalk, and it was just down a nasty chute, and I just made my way down the chute as slow as possible, and got to a point where I knew that they were either going to have to be there or the stalk was going to end. That's how nasty the terrain was getting. And I had just a couple more feet of approach that I could make. And once I made that approach, I was able to pick up the rear end of the sheep that I ended up shooting.
What type of distance was that?
So that was at 24 yards, compensated to 14.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Just ridiculously close. So I had spent, so I love shooting long range with my bow. And I had spent every morning for the past 3 months shooting out to 120 yards, just in case I had, I had to push that distance, I'd be comfortable making that shot. And in the end, I ended up shooting that ram at 14 yards compensated.
Wow. Goodness gracious. I just not being one who has done anything but dream about sheep. I just can't even imagine being that close to the species. That's so cool.
Yep. Well, and it was tough because I was inside. So when I initially found him, I was at 27 yards. And like I said, I was cliffed out, and I was there for over 30 minutes with that ram at 27 yards. And there's not a stitch of wind. I can hear my heartbeat. I'm just completely deked up, and I'm doing everything I can to calm down. But where this ram is, if I lean all the way out on the edge of the rock face, all I have is mid-neck to his nose. That's all I can see on him, but I can't move, a single step more just because of the terrain. It's absolutely dead quiet. So after 30 minutes, the wind starts to pick up, and it starts to pick up hard. And I covered the next 3 yards over the next 15 minutes, and it was the next 3 yards just gave me about 18 more inches of ledge that stuck out on the side of the cliff. So I was able to get there, get my feet set, and when I leaned out, I had mid-body forward. So I leaned out, lazed him. This time he was 24 yards, compensated to 14. And at that range, you can see him blink.
Right.
So just, I'm a mess, doing everything I can to try and hold it together. So, I get an arrow knocked, put another arrow on, laze him one more time just to make sure. And I come to full draw, and I roll down, and I'm just telling myself, level your bubble, level your bubble, level your bubble, and it just felt like it took 10 minutes to get my bubble rocked over to where it was level. And once the pin touched him, I don't remember squeezing the trigger. I don't remember going through any of my shot sequence other than telling myself to level the bubble. None of the stuff that I tell myself to do every time I shoot, with lining my peep sight up with my stroke ring, just the entire thing. I don't remember doing any of it, and that's that muscle memory and that autopilot. And when the arrow released, I absolutely torched him. Went right behind the shoulder, buried into the off shoulder, and the ram made it 10 yards.
Man, that's just crazy. He makes it 10 yards, so you see him go down?
So, no, because of the way the terrain laid, I didn't see him go down. I heard the arrow hit. When he turned to run, I could see the fletching sticking out of the top of his back. And then it was just a giant dust bowl. And then I heard a bunch of rocks rolling. And then the two big rams came out to the left and stood there at 30 yards. And then they finally moved off. I never saw the small ram. He never came out. And neither did any of the glassing teams. It's the cool thing is that 2 of the 3 glassing teams were able to watch my entire shot sequence. And matter of fact, they've got some of it through the spotting scope at over 2 miles away. A picture of the ram in the bottom and me on top. But they never saw the small ram bust out either. So I sat down because I started shaking so hard I was afraid I was going to fall off the mountain. And if I sat there, it felt like 3 hours, but it was probably 15 minutes. And then I pulled out the radio out of my pack, told the guys, called them, said, see if they'd seen anything. And nobody saw the ram go down just because of the way the train laid. So I threw the pack down, put all my stuff up, and it took me almost 30 minutes to cover that 24 yards. That's how steep and nasty the train was, before I was able to get around the corner and see the ram laid up. And I don't know how he didn't fall all the way off the mountain, where he was laying. He stopped in the last possible spot that he could before he rolled off the entire mountain.
Sheesh. So obviously getting him gutted and cleaned up and quartered was a challenge.
Oh man, it was tough. So I tied him off, and then called up the guys on the radio, and we came up with a plan. So the other guys met me up there, and we went back down to the ram, and I was the only one that could be at the sheep. So I would cut a piece off. I'd hand it up to Dave. Dave would hand it to Matt. Matt would hand it to my brother, and then my brother would bone it out on the ledge above.
That's so
we got
awesome.
some pretty good pictures of it, but I mean, that's how steep and how nasty the train was. Yep.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a full-blown team effort from it was a DIY hunt, but it's absolutely arrogant of myself to say that I did it myself. The team that I had in place with Dave and, all my friends that had come up from Denver, my brother, my friend Jennifer, Matt DeFrank, Dave Waller that lived there, these guys were what made the hunt successful for me, for sure. All I did was make the stock and pull the trigger.
I mean, it's amazing to do something on your own, and there's so much that can be said about accomplishing that, but to be able to share something this unique and this special with a group is, I think, the way to do it. Absolutely.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it made the hunt so much, to have my brother and have some of my friends there, and it was just amazing. Again, the outpour, and they were just as excited as I was. They treated it like it was their sheep, for Matt to take time off of work, to drive out there to do the sheep count, for my brother to take off work, for Jen, Dave, all those guys to put that time and effort, it meant a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So you mentioned those guys were 2 miles away from those glassing points. What was the pack out like? I mean, back to the trailhead, or wherever you guys had a base camp with this sheep?
Yeah, so that was one of the nice things, too, that I didn't mention earlier, is that Dave Waller has a bunch of horses. So our spike camp, it was probably 8 or 9 miles to get back into the back of the bowl. And he took us in on horseback to set up the camp. And then when those guys came around, there's a road that runs to the top of the ridge line, and it was probably about a 4 or 5 mile hike for them to get to me. And then they took the sheep back out the Jeep trail, and then we took the camp back out the horse trail.
Okay. Out of all the sheep hunts that you've done, was this certainly up there with one of the most special?
Oh, absolutely the most special. I mean, for me, this was my bucket list attainable animal. There's all animals that we want that, we'll probably never have, Marco Polo sheep, things like that. But to me, this was my top tier bucket list attainable animal. So, just an absolute dream come true. And for sure, one of the highlights of my hunting career, that may never be topped again.
Justin, this has been so good. Just, hearing some stories as well as getting some good information. I'm sure that we're going to have to get you back on here because there's so much that we didn't cover, so much more that we could cover, not only about sheep, but just about a bunch of the other species that you've had the opportunity to hunt. Before we let you go, though, how can listeners follow your hunt, stay up to date with you, get in contact with you, anything like that?
Yes, for sure. So probably the best way is just on Instagram at Justin Shaffer 1115. Is probably the best way to get a hold of me if you're interested in any of the guided hunts up here. Again, social media has just been phenomenal as far as making friends and contacts and making buddies around the world, inside the hunting industry.
Yeah.
So that's a great place to get a hold of me.
One last question. You've hunted in many states, many places, many species, many days in the field, more than most of us probably ever will. With all that experience, what's one thing that you're kind of still learning or still focusing on to improve as a hunter?
I think just the fact that no matter how much I learn and no matter how much what I do, every animal is different. So you got to take that approach that, every time you start in there, you're kind of starting over. You got your basic knowledge of either the area or the animal, but, you know, in the end, every animal is different. So, you know, it's just a constant evolution of, you know, learning, whether it's yourself or your equipment or the country or animal that you're in.
Well, once again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. To catch more episodes or learn how to subscribe, go to exomountaingear.com/podcast. To pick up the free training program that we co-developed with our friends at Atomic Athlete, go to exomountaingear.com/train. And to contact us directly, shoot us an email to podcast@exomountaingear.com.